this computer and pass it off to our wonderful presenters from PBS. During today's session, I will be monitoring the chat and will encourage you to put your questions in there as things are coming up. So presenters, take it away.
Well, I don't know if I get to talk first or Mandy. This is my second time with you all on this, and it's so exciting for me to be back. It means I did okay the first time. And what's really wonderful is to be back to get to talk about this project, Visions of America, All Stories, All People, All Places, and to be here with my collaborator. I'm going to let her start us off, and I'm going to throw it to Mandy.
Well, thank you so much, Heather. I am happy to be here with all of you and to be here, yes, with my collaborator, Heather. We are so excited to talk to you today about Visions of America, All Stories, All People, All Places, which is a collaboration between PBS Books and the Institute for Museum and Library Services in anticipation of America 250. So before we get started, we're going to tell you just very briefly about us, so you know who's going to be talking at you for the next little bit. So I'll get it started. I am Mandy Harris. I am the Museum and Library Engagement Coordinator for PBS Books. I am a citizen of Cherokee Nation, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Washington Information School up in Seattle. But right now I am coming to you from Idaho. So kind of all over the map there a little bit. And then Heather, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, so I am an MLIS, I'm an MPA. I am the National Director of PBS Books. I work at my local library, the Glen Ellen Public Library in Illinois, twice a week in the adult section. I'm an adult librarian, but I was formerly the head of a library on the East Coast, which was a library from 1889 and was a library, arts and cultural center, and had special collections of early Americana. And one of the things I love about this series is we're really celebrating lesser known stories of America. So it really leans into something I'm really passionate about, is to make sure everyone's story is heard. And so I think you'll hear that theme throughout about stories and about community and about building community through our stories, our collective story.
Oh, I love that, Heather. I love how you say that. And where Heather is an adult librarian, I am a children's librarian. If you couldn't tell by the brightly colored dress and the enormous earrings, I am a children's librarian. And so Heather and I really approach that. We have kind of the two bookends there, an adult programmer and a youth programmer, and you'll see those lenses too come through, because we have worked in libraries, we work in libraries, and so we really designed this with you in mind, to not only provide you with these amazing free resources that we're going to describe in the forthcoming webinar, but also thinking creatively. We know your time and your resources are valuable, so how can we support you with every facet of this program that we provide? And that being said, let's talk a little bit about Visions of America. Heather, would you like to kick us off with this?
Sure. So Visions of America really came together. The former director of IMLS, Crosby Kemper, many of you might know him. He was the head of the Kansas City Public Library, and he had this idea to really put together Visions of America, and PBS Books worked with him on it. And really what it is, there are 3 episodes we start with that are kind of going to the location. So it's like a museum or cultural organization, cultural site. Then it is a scholar. And then we're hearing first voices. And that is like a set approach for a series of our episodes. But we also really delve into what it means to be an American. What are the responsibilities of an American? And what is the role that museums and libraries play? No pressure here, but actually a lot of pressure within a democratic society, right? This important role, and that libraries and museums are really one of the last places where people can have true dialogue about everything. about everything, and you know that. So we have 7 episodes. We've won awards for this series. There's also bonus content, but really we're working to tell this diverse, this nation, this story, this of our diverse nation with a focus on these lesser known stories, people, places that contribute to the America we live in today.
Yes, and I think of it, we've used all these metaphors to describe it, and I really love the one that you said a couple of weeks ago, Heather. You said it was a tapestry. I was mixing my metaphors. I said there's these stories and there's threads and they're coming together in artwork, and you said a tapestry, and that's really what it is. It's these lesser known stories, these diverse stories that make up our nation, all of these threads being woven together that make up America as it is now in the upcoming semi-quincentennial. I said it. I had to practice. Our upcoming 250th anniversary. And did you notice I slowed way down to say it, but I got it. Our upcoming semi-quincentennial, our 250th anniversary. How are we weaving together these threads, these stories, these connections between us all to tell not just the story of our entire country, but the stories of our communities? And those threads of connection will pull out with each episode. So we are going to talk a little bit about each episode. So here you see Crosby Kemper, who Heather said this story was this Visions of America program. It's really the brainchild of Crosby Kemper, and kind of an overview of these episodes that really focus on how museums and libraries, they're not static places. They're living places that carry all of our stories inside, not just the books and the belongings that are on the shelves, but each person who walks through the doors of a library or museum is made up of stories. We're all made up of stories. And so I just think it's so exciting to celebrate these living institutions that carry us all on all of our stories. How about you, Heather?
No, agreed. And I love how, as we look at these different stories, that and we'll go over this more in depth, but what Mandy and I came up with are also programmatic tie-ins. And I think that's almost why we're so excited to share this, because we know from being librarians, we know life is busy as a librarian. And we also know it's hard to find quality content you can trust. And so, PBS Books, IMLS, you can trust this content, right? And then you can think about, like, it's been curated to be able to be utilized, so there are no rights issues. You can show it, you can show part of it, you can show all of it, you can take a clip of it, use it. Now we have discussion, we'll go through everything we have, but we even think of different days that these different episodes can help you celebrate or have a program for, or have, content for. We want to make this easy for you. And we also, if you can think of something we left out, we also want to hear from you.
All right, let's dive in. Let's talk about the very first episode. Heather, tell us a little bit about A Journey to the Freedom Tower, Stories of Cuban Migration to Miami.
Yeah, so before we start, I always like to ask, how many of you have heard of Ellis Island? Can you put it in the chat? Have you heard of Ellis Island? Well, I guess nothing's coming. Yes, I have a yes. No one else. Okay, Ellis. Oh, I have a thumb up. Thank you. So Ellis Island is, as many family came through there. Thank you, Elena. Ellis Island, my family came through. I'm from New York originally, or my family is, and they came through Ellis Island on their way to the US, right? The Freedom Tower. Now, when I lived in New York City for a long time. To me, the Freedom Tower was when the World Trade Center came down, the Freedom Tower was built. But when I went to Miami, actually in 2019, I learned about the Freedom Tower, which was a place of refuge for Cuban migrants during the 60s, right? So when Fidel came into power, Cubans were forced to leave, and the Freedom Tower was where they had to go. It was the Ellis Island of Miami. And so I say that to say this episode is amazing because I learned so much. I'm sure if you've seen it, you probably will learn as well. And maybe some of you have. Who has heard of the Freedom Tower in Miami before? Anyone?
I never had, Heather, until I watched this episode. I never had. working on the project, and I learned about it from the project.
Well, and it's so much fun, right? Because that is the sense of discovery you can feel. But what we love about this, right? You could use this content for Hispanic Heritage Month. It's easy. But you could also, I know in the community I live in, right, refugees are kind of a hot button issue. And it's hard sometimes for people to come together and talk about refugees. But this is also a place, a space where, you know, you could play this video and you could then talk about, well, Cuban refugees, what that looked like in Cuba. How is it in our community? Are there refugees and what are the support systems? In that case, you learn also Catholic Charities supported, right? Pedro Pan, which is where where kids were basically brought to Miami and put in foster care homes. But there's all different ways, right? Different entries for conversation. Windows or doors to be able to have, or mirrors in some ways, to be able to have these conversations. So we're really excited about this episode. You go, basically how this is formatted is you go to the Freedom Tower, which is also on Miami-Dade campus. We actually talk to Miami-Dade, some Miami-Dade students. We speak with Ada Ferreira, who wrote I think she won the Pulitzer Prize for that. I should have double checked before this, but for a book about Cuba. And then we go to Versailles, a restaurant that serves outstanding Cuban food, and listen to a group of Cuban Americans talking about their experience living in Miami and their stories, right? Because once again, it's about our stories that make us American. It's about our stories of why we're here and our lives today. And so that is what's highlighted in this episode. Back to you, Mandy.
Yes, and I love that you mentioned that they go to Versailles and they eat. So I'm one of those people, anytime I'm watching delicious food on television, I have to go make myself a little bit of a snack. But I think that's kind of the multi-sensory element of these episodes, is because there is so much tied into our stories, into our histories, into our cultures. Food is a big one, but also music, which, as Heather mentioned, we have these resources that we provided for you, these turnkey, ready-to-go resources. So for each episode, we've created Spotify playlists that you can access for free that we have curated. And so the Miami episode has a curated playlist of all Cuban American composers and musicians that you could, for example, if you wanted to show this episode as your patrons walk in, you could play that music. And so I just think, thinking of these multi-sensory elements, the food, the music, it really helps us dive deeper into the stories.
Into the culture too, right?
Yes.
To enjoy the culture. And I think of food and music are two essential elements of culture. So
Exactly. And then from Miami, we travel all the way across the United States to one of my cities. We head to Seattle and we explore the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle and stories of the Asian Pacific American experience. So the Wing Luke Museum was established in 1967, and it is the only Pan-Asian community-based museum in the United States. And so we talk about Wing Luke, who was a Washington State politician and was the first Asian American to be elected to office in the Pacific Northwest. And then they interview Gary Locke, who was one of Washington's governors and was the first Chinese American governor in the United States. And so this legacy that passed from Wing Luke, who we lost tragically so young, he was only 40 years old when he passed away in a plane crash, but that legacy that he started, that then continued to Governor Gary Locke, and then that continues today. And then we also touch upon other aspects of the Asian Pacific American experience, particularly in the Northwest, and talk about the resilience of Japanese Americans during the internment in World War II. And then we also talk with Betty Luke, who's the youngest sister of Wing Luke, and how she's carrying on her brother's legacy and the spirit of social justice that continues today. Heather, is there something you'd like to share about this episode?
yeah, for me, this episode, and once again, it's about stories, right? So I knew somewhat about the internment camp when I was growing up, and I'm on the older side, but it was like internment camps were like a footnote in my history book. And One of my dear friends is Japanese American, and I realized when I saw this episode, I thought, wonder, I wonder if her father lived in an internment camp. And I asked her, I said, did your father live in an internment camp? And she said, actually, for the first time in his life, because he was born in America, he had gone back to Japan to visit and meet his family. And he didn't speak Japanese. But when he came to come back to the country, his family farm had been taken. Like he would really like couldn't get back. Now he since obviously made it back in it. But my point was like she has kids who are my age, and I said, do your girls know that? Oh, my kids are teenagers, those two. And she said, no, I don't think they do. And so it sparked this ability to say, let's tell these stories to our kids. Let's make sure we're able to write. And that's some of the thinking too, is about the storytelling, sparking the idea of storytelling and keeping those community stories, those family stories alive. And for me, this really resonated. Also we look at the Wing Luke Museum, we see how artists, right, are making their statement pushing against the norm and using art in making people think about the world we're in and also what they've experienced. So it's a really amazing episode.
And just as Heather was saying, sharing these stories with our youth, with the next generations, the resources that we provided you with also include book lists. And we have book lists for each episode for grown-ups, for adults, and we also have a youth book lists for each episode too, so that you can extend the learning beyond programming, beyond the episodes. You can, if somebody wants to learn more, when their curiosity is piqued by watching these episodes, or if they're sharing intergenerational stories like Heather describes, you have book lists to hand them all ready to go that we've created for you.
And if you don't have the books on the book list, because we know how that goes, you don't have to do interlibrary loan. You can use it as a jumping off point, right? It's what I always do when I use our book lists in my library when I'm doing a book display. I use that as a jumping off point, and I say, okay, what else exists? What are the other read-alikes that I get through Novelist? What are the other, things that populate even in Amazon if I type something in, what are those other book recommendations? But I use those, usually the books that we're putting in a book list, we've not only been like, these are good ones, but sometimes our partner has done that. And then also IMLS has signed off on those book recommendations as well.
All right, so then from Seattle, we head to Kansas City. Heather, take us to Kansas City.
So Kansas City, I love discovering 18th and Vine because one of the positive side effects of terrible segregation and drawing of lines that have been, think of the Great Migration. African Americans could only have businesses and live in certain areas. But as a result of this, you have this vibrant African American center of culture within Kansas City. And so we go to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and if anyone's been watching the news recently, they just appeared who saw that? Mandy, did you see? Like, I got an alert on my phone that now it's going to be integrated more into the overall and
Yes.
Major Baseball League, and I was like, oh yeah, so really exciting.
I was so excited about that too, and I said, I know all about that because of the episode. Yes.
But we also go to the American Jazz Museum, and they are in like the same complex. And we are hearing from the directors and volunteers and authors who have all participated in these two amazing cultural sites. We also learn as we go to Ollie's barbecue, which, I know it's not quite dinner time for you all, but it's getting there for me. We learn about this delicious food, but also the really culture coming back into 18th and Vine, and really the vibrancy that's occurring at this moment. And that's the nice thing. We're looking back and we're looking forward at the moment. And so, yeah, it's really exciting and a great episode.
And as Heather mentioned, we've provided in our discussion guide these programming tie-ins. So I know as a citizen of Cherokee Nation, as a Cherokee woman, sometimes I get very frustrated when the only times we're acknowledged is November during Native American Heritage Month. So when we were putting together these programming tie-ins, we wanted to think holistically all year round. And so we put together all of these programming tie-ins that really encompass the whole year. So if you wanted to show this episode, you could show it for Jazz Appreciation Month, which is April. But also in April, and I think this is really cool, the things you learn. So you have Jazz Appreciation Month in April, and then International Jazz Day is April 30th. But not only that, National Baseball Day is April 22nd. So you have all of these things kind of really beautifully dovetailing together. And as Heather mentioned, this could also work well for programming and discussions on the Great Migration or Jackie Robinson Day, also in April 15th. And so we have these programming ideas, and we know as librarians, sometimes you're trying to come up with programs and thinking, and I used to Google in the library, like, what holidays are coming up? And so we've done that work for you. I would go to, when I was doing children's programming, I would Google unusual holidays and to come up with new programming ideas. So we've done that work for you. And then from Kansas City, we head to Phoenix, and we hear Voices from the Heard Museum, Stories of First Americans. So the Heard Museum in Phoenix, it highlights Indigenous creativities from artworks to contemporary creations. And we also discuss our histories, our cultures, and the policies. And it really, as with all of these episodes, it focuses on amplifying these lesser known stories. So we talk with Walter Echohawk, who's Pawnee, and he's an author, an attorney, a law professor, and we learned so much about Native American civil rights from him. And then we also talk with Philip Deloria, who's Dakota and is a professor at Harvard University. And so I learned a lot from this episode, and I really loved seeing Indigenous creativities and cultures and arts reflected back at me. And I use those plurals very specifically because this episode does a great job at not just portraying us as a monolith, but actually showing that Indigenous Americans were diverse amongst ourselves. And I really appreciated that about this beautiful episode. Heather, is there something you'd like to share?
Agreed. I mean, I also think it really goes into a lot of the politics that maybe not in a bad way, because I know sometimes people think politics, but thinking about tribal sovereignty, thinking about where we are at the moment as a nation, given the, and I put this kind of also in perspective with America 250 and the Constitution, right? Like what was written in the Constitution and then what people got, right? And who got it, right? It kind of goes into that, but not in a way that's going to be really offensive, but lets you think about it, pushes you to think about some of those things in a way. And I really, I learned a lot from this episode too. I mean, this is why my job is fun, right? Because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I knew that, oh, but I didn't know that, right? And I think the same. Look, librarians, we are curious people, right? And so are PBS viewers, and so are library patrons. And in fact, PBS National has spent a lot of money looking at that, right? So we know people who go to libraries are curious. And that's also why we're excited to share this series with you.
And, Heather, when you said that, these lesser known policies and injustices, so just in early June, just a couple weeks ago, it was the 100th anniversary of the Indian Citizenship Act, which granted Native American citizenship in the United States just 100 years ago, 1924. So talking about these policies that are still within very recent memory, or the Indian Arts and Crafts Act of 1990, these very, very recent policies that often go undertold, and it's so important. All right, and then from Phoenix, we head to Uncovering Genealogy. Heather, would you tell us about this episode?
Yeah, so this episode we visit the International African American Museum, which is brand new. It's in Charleston, South Carolina, and it is actually on it is at basically the dock or the right on, at the place where the most number of enslaved people when they arrived in this country where they would arrive. And a lot of thought had been put into this placement, this building, this institution. In addition to hearing about this amazing museum that is brand new, we also meet with the head of the family, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's the Family Center Research, the Family Research Center. And he talks about how people of all, yes, you can be African American or you don't have to be, you can do this research within their space. And it's really wonderful also to have him, he speaks about kind of the connections and the ways to do research and just the learning that can occur. Then we speak to an amazing scholar. Her name is Laverne Gray, Dr. Laverne Gray, and her work is funded by IMLS, and it looks at Black collectives in Chicago by location, by community, right? And I think what's really neat about this is as we are so connected with our communities, thinking about the communities that exist, right? And also those relationships and the synergies and what is family, what is community, and these relationships and also these synergies. I know I did a little bit of this once and I was like, oh, I bet that artist knows that writer because they're in the city at the same time. I have no proof of it. But, Archibald Motley is painting at the same time, right? Like thinking about some of these relationships. She's looking at the 60s and going backwards as well. But it's really cool to think about genealogy in a new way. And so we also, obviously, people who love PBS often love finding your roots. And this is a nice entry point in for that as well.
I love that point you make, Heather. It isn't just our family ancestry, which is very important in and of itself, but there's also an ancestry to our communities. How did our community get to where it is now, and tracing those connections between us all in a community and then exploring the ancestry of our community. That's very beautiful. I love that.
Well, and I like how you said it. I think you made it sound way better. I made it.
Yeah.
I mean, right? Because this is the thing. Not every 250 years of our nation is what we're coming up to and why this was created. But there were people, as we've just discussed, who were certainly here more than 250 years ago. Colorado, right? Like think of where we are, but what we're looking at, what we're talking about is being able to talk about the history of our communities and where we're at this moment. And the good and maybe the not so good, right too, because I am a true believer that the best thing you can do is to look at your failures, your mistakes, and learn from them in order to not repeat history and to learn from that moment and talk about that moment so we can be better for our children, for our future.
Very beautifully said. And then we head to exploring history, trailblazing women in museum and library spaces. So speaking of an ancestry of a community, this is the ancestry of our field, of our careers. This is talking about those trailblazing women in museum and library spaces who made it possible for me to do what I do, for you to do what you do. And I learned so much from this episode and about women that I didn't know of, who I owe everything to. And so we talk about the National Museum of Women in the Arts and its mission and its founding and continuing the legacy of its co-founder, Billie Cole Holliday, and why it was founded. Heather, I'm going to throw it to you on this because you have a really great story that ties into the founding of the National Museum of Women in the Arts.
So I studied art history as one of my majors in college. And so has anyone taken intro to art history? Thumbs up if you have. No one. All right. So this is the thing. is that there is a book, and I swear the book is like this big, and it's Jansen's, art history or intro to art. And why so this book is like, this book has been around, right? Why? Oh, you totally had that class. Thank you, Tia. I knew there would be someone who had. So this is what's amazing is that within that big, thick book that literally like, that is the book you would use to like flatten like a flower or whatever, because it was so big, there was not one work of art that had been created by a woman. That is why this museum got started, is because the founder was like, something is wrong here, and I am in a unique position to remedy it. And she also was like, and guess what? All of these female artists out there, their artwork has been undervalued, and I can buy it up more quickly. And right, like, it's really intriguing. But the point of this is to really like learn about these trailblazing women who, as Mandy said, have enabled us to do what we do. We still might get 70 cents on a dollar, at least for now. But we're working on that too, you guys. and so I think, it's an awesome episode, and really I learned a lot. So I hope you'll take time or maybe share it with others.
Well, and then were you going to say something, Heather?
No, back to you, Mandy.
I was going to say, when we created these discussion guide and the resources, there are all these, again, using threads as my metaphor, of connection running through the episodes. So for example, another resource that we're creating for you is a programming guide, a youth programming manual for museums and libraries that features activities that you can do, because we know that, your average 9-year-old is probably not going to sit down and watch the entirety of one of these episodes, but you could show them a clip and then do one of the activities that we have, supply lists and instructions. And so when I was working on that, I was reading about an artist named Carmen Herrera, who you told me about, Heather, who was a Cuban-American artist. But there was a quote that she said is that somebody at one point flat out told her, because she was born in 1915, and she lived to the age of 106. I learned so much about this fascinating woman thanks to both of these episodes. And but somebody told her, being female, being Latina, we're just not going to be able to sell your art the way we can a male artist. And then she had her first work of art accepted into a gallery at the age of 89. So she had gone to school for architecture, she painted, she studied, she took private lessons as a child, studied in Paris. I was reading all about this fascinating woman, Heather, and sold her first work at the age of 89, and then kept painting well into her hundreds every day. And so just this inspiration that we can find in these people through each episode, I just think it's fascinating. And then we will go from, we're going to go from the National Museum of Women in the Arts to the Arab American National Museum. Heather, tell us about the Arab American National Museum and Voices of Arab American Experiences.
So for this episode, we go to Dearborn, Michigan. And that, I want to say, in the early 2000s, the Arab American National Museum opened, and it is truly a community museum. They have a garden on their rooftop. They have living, breathing artists who are displaying throughout their museum, but it's very much serving. It's also like a community center in a lot of ways. So we speak with the director, we learn about priorities of the organization, and then we speak with Dr. Shabaro, who is a professor and librarian out of Columbia University, their Global Studies program. And we hear her story, and we hear, about her work. And one of the things that was really touching for me is that there was a moment where we asked her kind of like about why she became a librarian, right? And she's curated this amazing exhibit. She led on this exhibit that dealt with Islamic, I want to say it's Islamic art and books and mathematics, right? And science. And I'm sure Mandy knows the exact name, I'm sorry. but having said that, her story is, when we asked her, like, why did you become this? And she said, she was a teenager, she was living in Lebanon, and that there had been a bombing not far from her house where she was walking down the street, and that she just remembers looking up and seeing like papers flying, like archival papers flying in the air. And near where she was walking, there was like an archive like that had been bombed. And she said it was that moment that she realized that if it was important enough for someone to bomb to destroy, that she wanted to spend her life basically keeping it safe and doing that work to make sure that the stories of people, that these important archives were protected. And I really, like, it touched me so much because I was like, well, what is the work, how is the work I do as a librarian? Like, why did I make this choice? And I came to being a librarian a little late. I was in the museum space, but that's probably for another conversation, except I will say I'm in this space because of the access, right? Like libraries are about access for everyone. And that is why we love what we do, or I love what I do. And so anyway, all that being said, Dr. Chabarro's interview is amazing. And, we wanted to share that with you as well. Back to you, Mandy.
I can visualize that scene that she describes in my head so vividly, and it makes me very emotional and really grateful for what we do, which is, as you said, preserving stories and connecting people with stories. And it's truly, I can't think of a better word than it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful, and we're very lucky. I consider myself very lucky to be a librarian.
Me too.
So, as we've said, we're using these episodes really to uncover community stories. So what we're hoping is that through each episode, your patrons, your community members will find these threads of connection. And when we create, we'll talk a little bit more about the discussion guide in just a moment, but when we create these discussion questions, there are several dozen discussion questions for each episode. You are welcome to write your own, but we tried to do as much of the work ahead of time for you because we know how valuable your time is. But we divided each of those discussion questions for each episode into themes and sub-themes, depending on what threads of connections, what mirrors and windows your community members find with each episode. Is there anything you would like to share about this, Heather?
No, I think that was perfect.
Okay. Oh, good. Oh, good. All right. Well, we'll go on to the next slide again, and we'll talk a little bit about these resources. We'll go a little bit more in depth, but we have episodes for you. We have all of the episodes that we described, plus those bonus episodes. And once you have access to them, so we're going to share the link where you can register. You'll get an email from me with the login and the password, and then you can download the episodes, which we encourage you to do to prevent any sort of Wi-Fi technical difficulties. We have the discussion guide that features the programming tie-ins. We have our Spotify lists, the related videos. We have press release samples that you can just rearrange, drag and drop, plug in your own information. And we have a curriculum, which we'll talk about in just a moment.
So there's two things I just want to follow up with on this. One is that the screeners can be used, and especially the 26-minute screeners. When I do those screeners at my local library, I do them in tandem with a discussion or a panel of people, dependent on what day and who I have and what makes sense. There are other shows that are longer. You could just show 26 minutes. You can show what makes sense to you. I also got an email today from someone who was like, hey, I want to use clips. Can I use clips? Yes, you can. These resources are for you. They're for libraries. And if there's something we didn't think of, let us know what it is, and we'll do our best. I mean, the educational curriculum that we developed was definitely, like, Mandy and I were like, what about the kids? Like, it's all about having fun, right? Like, to learn. I mean, I remember that was like, it was a trick, like growing up, like my parents were like, let's go to the library, right? And, learning was fun. And it's like that hidden agenda of like, look at us now. But yeah, no, I think that's just, we want you to be able to use it in any way that makes sense.
So as we said, here's an image of the cover of the discussion guide. And the discussion guide has the overall project summary, a summary for each episode, the biographies of all of the creators and leadership and featured guests in each episode, those discussion questions, several dozen for each episode, more than you could ever get through in a single program for each episode. And then possible program tie-ins, like we were saying, like National Baseball Month, Jazz Appreciation Day. So these programming tie-ins for each episode.
So I wanted to respond to a quick question before you go into is that everything should have closed captions. If it doesn't, let us know. The Miami episode was also translated into Spanish with closed caption Spanish. And so I believe it was only done for that episode. I can double check if you have interest, but it was, that is what I'm aware of.
Thank you, Heather. All right, so I mentioned those book lists a little bit ago. Here's an example. So we have the adult book list for the Seattle episode, Wing Luke Museum. And then here's an example of a youth book list. It's our book list for 18th and Vine for Kansas City. And I have to say, I learned just from putting these book lists together. So there were 3 women who played for the Negro Leagues. And one of the co-owners of one of the teams was an African-American woman. So women were very essentially involved with the Negro Leagues baseball. And I just think that you learn so much. So even, and as Heather said, you may not have all of these books in your library, but these can be a jumping off point for you to find more books or to have other ideas. And then we have our music lists, so themed around each episode. And so, so for example, for the Herstory episode, for the National Museum of Women in the Arts, all of the music on that episode is by female composers. So it's all classical music by female composers. So everything is really themed around the episode. Or for the Kansas City episode, because it features the American Jazz Museum, we've linked to their website and they have a plethora of Spotify lists. So everything is curated around each episode. And the curricula we are very excited about. So there is a classroom curriculum that can be used for high school, for homeschool. Heather reminded me at that point, it could be very useful. So it's geared towards high school classrooms, but I know I have a lot of families who homeschool at my library, and they're always looking for really rich, engaging curriculum. And so this would be an option for them. And then for libraries and museums, we have a curriculum for elementary and middle school geared to 1 hour weekly, bi-weekly programs, however often you do your tween programs. We've got curricula for you. So for example, here's a sample of our Heard Museum episode, and it focuses on Indigenous astronauts and aerospace engineers. So the first Native American astronaut was John Harrington. He's Chickasaw. The first Native American woman astronaut is Nicole Anapu Man, who's Round Valley Indian tribes, Wailaki of the Round Valley Indian tribes. And then there was an aerospace engineer named Mary Golda Ross, who was Cherokee. So we use the Heard Museum as a way to combine art and science and learn about these Native American astronauts and aerospace engineers. Anything you would like to share about the curriculum, Heather?
No, I'm really excited about this curriculum. I actually, before I became a librarian, I was the head of an arts education museum in New York City that came out of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So working with Mandy, I mean, Mandy definitely took the lead, but working with her on these, just so much fun, right? Because we want to make learning fun for everyone, for the old and the young at heart.
Yes. And for example, for one of the activities that we're doing for this, the kids are going to design their own planet. They're going to design their own planet, and then they'll trade with another kid. And that kid has been stranded on that planet and then has to build things to survive on that planet. So we list all the supplies that you can put out. So it's both a creative exercise and then also very artistic. And we will put this link in the chat, but this is the sign up link and how you can sign up for all of these resources. You fill out this survey. I email you the login, the password, everything you need, and you are ready to go. And then here's a little tour of what, once you log in, that's what you will see. And so what questions do you have from us? Feel free to put them in the chat.
And while you guys do that, I just want you all to know, right? So this is one thing that PBS Books has done. We did this award-winning series, but every Wednesday, we have a live conversation that goes out. And what's coming up actually is work that we do with the Library of Congress, the National Book Festival. And so, you know, that is such an exciting thing to be able to share these, you know, author interviews. Sometimes I interview Ken Burns or other filmmakers, Henry Louis Gates, and libraries can cross-post and utilize that content when it happens. Or I know one of the things some libraries have started to do is utilize some of those author talks, you know, for their book groups, like giving them like a QR code that goes along with the author talk. I know when I used to lead author book clubs, not everyone would read the book, but at least, you know, if they had a video or a conversation with the that they could watch with the author, it gave them something extra to learn and to be on the same page. So there are lots of things. Mandy or I am happy to have a conversation about that as well. If you need more information or you want to know more, but I can tell you that starting, I think it's June 10th, we are every Wednesday in there, we'll be having a conversation with the Library of Congress and an author to promote their National Book Festival. So are there questions in the chat that you guys have for us?
And I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to put some of those helpful links in the chat. Oh, thank you, Tia. You are ahead of me. Thank you.
Sorry, were there other ones that you'd like in there?
I did send that PBS Books, the Readers Club link.
Yes, got it.
And then the other thing is, if anyone's going to the ALA meeting, we will be there. Or if someone from your library is and you want to talk to us in person or meet us for coffee, like we're going to San Diego this month. Yeah, I'm like next month. No, it's this month. It's in a few weeks. And we love hanging out with people who we get to speak with on webinars. It makes it more fun for us. Okay. Well, back to you, Tia. Thank you so much for having us. It's been such an honor.
Well, thank you,
so much.
Heather and Mandy. We just really appreciate you coming and chatting with us today. I know there were quite a few people that couldn't attend right at this hour, and so that's why we recorded it. Christy, for those of you who are on the call with us, Christy will email everyone a link to the survey, as well as a link to the webinar and all of the resources from PBS, including contact information for both Mandy and Heather. So I don't know about y'all, but I'm really excited to watch these videos and look at those book lists and update my Spotify playlists. Like, I'm always looking for new stuff to listen to. So really excited about that, and just really grateful that you were able to be here today with us.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us. And yeah, we definitely hope to get to come back and share more. And if there are specific things you all want, you have to let us know, because everything we do is based really on what libraries have asked us. So thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being partners.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.